Hello, welcome to another episode of Pursuit 365 Real Estate and Finance Fridays with yours truly, Shelly Smee. Today, we are joined by Lysa Dixon. She's a very experienced mortgage professional and also a owner and proponent in a co-housing space. Welcome, Lysa.
Hi, Shelly.
So it's so great to finally meet you in person again. I forgot that we had bumped into each other a few years ago, but you moved out of your place where some clients of mine live to move into your co-housing home. How long were you involved with the project prior to moving in? And can you tell me a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so I joined Little Mountain Co-housing very early on. So that would have been early 2015 before we had land. We actually moved in March of 2021. So that's how long of a journey it was. Yeah, but really exciting to be involved with the project right from the beginning.
So when you became involved, had you been aware of co-housing or had you sought out this type of of uh, opportunity, or was it, how did you find out about the project and or about co-housing in general?
Yeah, I knew about co-housing. I'd heard of Windsong co-housing and had been familiar with that from the time I first moved to Vancouver. But Langley was never a place that, I wanted to be in the city. And there were other projects that came along at different times, but the location was never quite right for me or the timing. And Little Mountain kind of came around at the right time and the right location. It was in the city. So it wasn't something I was actively seeking out, but it was certainly something I was interested in and aware of. Yeah.
And from the point of view of it as a real estate category,
Mm-hmm.
did you, being in the mortgage space, did you have any hesitation or any thoughts around, okay, am I going to be able to get financing? Or you also specialize in that space, or that's one of your areas of expertise, is I guess what you call well, I guess we're trying to actually get away from any kind of stigma that co-housing has, because for the most part they're stratas, and we'll maybe talk about some other legal structures for some co-housing developments, but for the most part we're talking about a strata. So that's kind of the conversation we were having the other day, and I'll let you take it away from the mortgage broker's point of view about what is co-housing. It's a strata.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in simple terms, co-housing isn't the legal title. It's got nothing to do with the legal title to the property. Um, Co-housing is more the opportunities that exist within that space to interact with your neighbors. And I say opportunities because it's generally not a required thing. It's like it's there if you want, not if you don't. Um, and that's kind of in its simplest terms. You're right, most co-housing in Canada is strata or condo titled, but there are some co-ops. One of the important defining pieces of co-housing, though, is that everybody has their own private home. So you have
Dwelling,
a kitchen,
right?
you have a bathroom, you have a living room, you have everything you would have like in any other regular private home. You're not sharing any of that with anyone else. Um, but like
So
I
we're
said,
talking freehold title,
yeah, in
right?
the case of a strata,
Freehold,
it's
most
freehold
cases.
title. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's exactly. It's freehold title. It is. I had no hesitations. The project I joined, I knew was going to be freehold title. I had no hesitations with that because really, I have my apartment that has, two bedrooms, two bathrooms, a kitchen, a living room. It's got closets. It's got,
Got everything you need and everything
got
you
everything you
wanted.
need in it. Yeah. Yeah. But I also have the option of going out my back door and going into the common spaces and using some of the common amenity rooms. So it's not, like I said, it's not, It's not the legal title that makes it co-housing. It is the opportunities to interact and relate.
Living community.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you are approached by people that are asking you as a mortgage broker, hey, I'm interested in this type of a property. Excuse me, that's my dog Coco. Unfortunately, I can't mute her. We have people working on at our building today, just doing some re-leveling some pavers, and she's not very happy about it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, goodness. Coco, be quiet. Add some reality to this, right?
That's right.
This is actually happening in our homes. So, one of the things that is often, I think, a challenge for some forming groups
Mm-hmm.
is getting the financing, not only for, people to go buy the land and for essentially the owners are the builders, are the developers. So there's also the requirement that the project is in alignment with what people want in a
Mm-hmm.
building, but also what lenders are going to be willing to lend against. Were you involved, or have you been involved with any of the financing requirements to help people get pre-qualified? I guess the question I'm asking is, because this isn't, most of them aren't done by like a big name developer.
Mm-hmm.
How do you pre-qualify somebody? Is it the same process, or is it a different process?
If you're talking about pre-qualifying somebody to purchase their unit, like at the end on
Hmm.
completion, it's the same as any other pre-sale.
Right.
Exactly the same as any other. It's a pre-sale. I mean, once you have the developer's disclosure, once you have the signed purchase contract, it's a pre-sale. And we all know, I mean, I work with tons of pre-sale situations in the Lower Mainland, and
Right.
we all know those are sometimes done 2, 3, 4 years ahead of actual completion.
Hmm.
So, it's the same with working with any mortgage broker, any lender who's dealing with pre-sales. You need to be aware of what the risks are, and there's rewards for that too, but you need to be aware, is your income likely to change in that time frame. You can't go blow all your down payment in the 4 years leading up to completion, because you're going to need that down payment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Some lenders will do rate holds 2-3 years out, but those are typically much higher rates. You don't really want to go there. But it's
Would
important.
you be locked into that rate? I mean, if the rates are lower, wouldn't you get a better rate?
No, because they're banking on rates being higher. So it's very rare to have something fully confirmed.
Right.
Anything more than about 4 to 6 months before possession.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, really, who knows what happens in the world in 4 years? I mean, we went through the
Yep.
pandemic.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
just never know.
But
So,
it's
what type
exactly.
of people do you think are the most likely purchasers of pre-sales these days, since our investor markets seem to have disappeared?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's all over the map. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of young couples in pre-sales. Um, first time home buyers. I'm seeing downsizers going into pre-sales. Um, yeah, it's I can't put it really depends on the project.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, what would you say is the mix of age groups in your building
In
at
our
Little
building,
Mountain? Yeah.
I think the youngest is 3 weeks old and the oldest 82 or 83. And we're quite spread out between there.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
How many units ended up being built there?
Yeah, we have 25 units,
Okay.
and I think we have about 50 people total.
Oh,
Kind of
cool.
lost count
Yeah.
because we've added a few babies since we moved in 3
Right.
years ago, but, yeah,
It's
yeah.
already been 3 years. Wow.
I know, I can't believe it's been 3 years. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So you asked about, and we talked about how co-housing is more the opportunity to interact with your neighbors. It's not about the legal title. And I discovered something recently. So I live on a street that's a bunch of fairly new buildings, and
Mhm.
a lot of they were all built sort of around the same time as us. And the building across the street, I've come to discover after some people there visiting here and seeing our kids' playroom and so on and so forth, the building across the street has an amenity room like most stratas do now. In city of Vancouver especially,
Mhm.
they do require a certain amount of amenity space. So they had this amenity room that wasn't being used. After seeing our kids' playroom, they went and put a bunch of toys in theirs and turned it into a kids' playroom.
Oh,
So
that's great.
it's kind of neat that we're spreading beyond our walls. Yeah.
A
Yeah.
cross-pollination of the whole idea of what makes community and what makes, um and actually, I mean, I'm a realtor, you're a mortgage broker, but we are dealing with people's sociological and mental health when we're helping
Mhm.
them through these processes, because it's very stressful.
Yep.
But home and community, like one of the ladies in our group says, family is everything and co-housing is everything else. Like,
Yep.
that's her sort of take on it. Is there may be people that don't want to live in community or have a lot of interaction with their neighbors, and I don't really get it. I mean,
Mhm.
I really love my privacy, but I also
Mhm.
really love being able to go down to the common house and book it out to have 40 people over for a little get together.
Yeah.
And
You know,
yes, you might be able to do that at another building in their amenity space, but we've already started planning our Thanksgiving and holiday schedule
mhm.
for the common space, because we'll have like some community meals. And instead of making a huge turkey for and doing everything for everybody in my family,
Mhm.
you know, maybe people don't have families that are living local or alive anymore.
Yeah.
It's, depending on where you are in your life and what kind of interests you have as well. If like me, single woman, all my
Mhm.
stepkids are fully grown up, and you
Mhm.
know I love hearing from them, but you just don't, because they're at that age.
Yep.
You don't hear from them very often. But um I love all the little kids running around, and I love the fact that we also have some elderly people as well. So it to me it just makes me feel like after COVID and after the isolation, I don't think I realized how important it was for me to have that connection until we were in lockdown, and
Mhm.
I ended up being in my apartment all by myself for weeks
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Zoom,
Yeah.
doing courses and classes for our brokerage, as opposed to baking bread. Everybody's doing all this bread baking, and I'm like, what the hell? I just spent the whole day on Zoom.
Yeah. I often tell people, like, I love living alone. I've owned my own home for several years, and I love living alone. And I often tell people what's great about co-housing for me is I can live alone with other people. And
Hmm.
I could spend all week in my apartment and not see anyone else if that's what I chose to do. But I can also go out my back door and into the common house and have a glass of wine with my neighbors, or go to a common meal. We do common meals 3 times a week. That is fantastic. And
Yeah.
sometimes I might not be in the mood to sit and eat with everybody, and I'll take my food and come back to my apartment. And sometimes I want to sit and have dinner with someone else and talk about their day. So that's a really neat part of it.
Hmm. Hmm. When I was doing a little bit of research for Compass Co-housing, which is going
Mhm.
to be out in Langley, I looked on the Canadian cohousing website and noticed that there one caught my eye that I spent a lot of time looking at. It's up in Powell River, and they've
Mhm.
got, I think, 35 acres of land
Mhm.
that's been purchased, and they have the co-op structure. And
Mhm.
right now, so as an equity co-op, it's 100 and I think it's 174,000. I'll have to double check. It was either 124 or 174. There were some different numbers on there, but one of them was from the previous year. But in the cases of something like an equity co-op where your significant deposit of that money goes towards getting the plot of land for
Mhm.
you to be able to build your own structure on, how would you finance something like that?
Yeah, and so that would be just like any other co-op, and I'm not familiar enough with Powell River's legal
Right.
structure to know, but it would be like a co-op. So it definitely is more challenging. Sorry, it's not like a co-op; it is a co-op,
Yeah.
and it would be like any other co-op. It's definitely more challenging to get financing, and you'd probably be looking at a credit union and probably a specifically a local credit union.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that goes back to where like co-housing is not, um, has nothing to do with the title or the legal ownership of the property.
Right.
And so, in a strata titled co-housing, there should not, it's getting financing just like any other
Exactly.
unit.
I've actually hardly ever sold any co-ops that are that kind of co-op, equity co-op. Of course, there's a lot of older buildings in Kerrisdale and the West End and whatnot that I've sold co-ops in, those traditional share purchase
Yeah.
co-ops,
And,
which you
and
also have to have usually at least a 30% down payment.
30,
But I just wasn't
35% down. Yeah.
35.
And
Um,
in Vancouver, you're pretty much limited to Van City. Van City's really good about financing those. I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head that will finance the co-ops in the Lower Mainland.
right. That'll
Mhm.
readily just say, yep, we
Yeah,
know about this one. Here you go. Because you're essentially buying shares in a corporation and you're not getting any title to land.
that's
So it
yeah,
becomes not really an interest in land. It becomes a long term, lease with the right to occupy your unit and shares in a company that owns the building and land
yeah.
in a corporation. So, and those predate the Strata Property Act from the late 60s, early 70s, the first condominium act as we knew it back
Yep,
then.
yep.
Um, how long have you been in the mortgage business real estate space, Lysa?
I'm doing math in my head right now.
I know I don't want to out you
Yeah,
with what
yeah.
how
No,
old you've
it's
been.
been 13 years, I think.
13?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. 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 Well, I looked at the calendar and, doing a little bit of long range planning
Hmm.
because, of course, when you're looking at the pre-sale environment, you're always looking a couple years out.
Yep.
And I thought, holy crap, am I going to actually make it to 30 years?
Right.
2026 will be 30 years for me in the
Yeah.
business. And I'm like,
Wow.
should I have a party? Should I retire? Am I ever going to retire? Am I having
Yep.
enough fun yet?
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating. There's just between the moving goalposts of our regulatory environment, which is
Mhm.
always changing, to just watching the growth of the Lower Mainland
Mhm.
over the last. Well, I moved here in 1985, right after high school, but I mean, out in the valley, I hadn't been to Langley in probably almost a year.
Mhm.
Oakwyn's opened an office out there, but I missed going to the opening. And then I had a number of different clients that were asking me about stuff out there. So about 4 months ago, I drove out there
Mhm.
and I was just flabbergasted.
Mhm.
Even since like a year ago,
Yeah.
what's happening in the valley and certainly along the transit oriented um, lines in Surrey and Langley is
Mhm.
stupendous.
I know it's crazy, isn't it? I was out there. I actually went to a Compass event probably about a month ago, and it's been ages since I've been out in that area, and it was just like, wow, this is a whole different world.
Oh yeah, where you were at the one at Windsong where they were discussing the common area amenities?
No,
No?
we did a financing info session
Oh, okay.
thing. I was the night before that, just for
Oh, okay.
people
Cool.
to learn a little bit about getting a mortgage pre-approval. So
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent. So, I mean, I would, because it's basically, it is a strata, it's the
Mhm.
same rules apply, have your taxes done for 2 years, have everything paid off that you can. Um, but as you say, the farther away you are from completion, the more um, unlikely you're going to get a rate that's held for that long.
Yeah,
So,
and
what would you say your sort of top three, say 2 years out advice would be
sure.
for people
Yeah,
buying a pre-sale?
I give the same advice to any of my pre-sale clients. Number one is to keep really good records of all of your down payment, including um, bank statements showing your deposits leaving your bank account. Sometimes lenders, 2, 3 years later, will want to see where those deposits came from. So just be
Right.
prepared for that. That's number one. Um, I always tell my pre-sale clients, if sometime between now and possession date you decide to make any big life changes or you're thinking about big life changes, call me. Like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what the implications are. I
Would
had a
would that be like
situation.
buying a car or something?
It could be buying a car, quitting your job, anything. I had a situation, I guess it was this last year, where the client did exactly that. He had decided he wanted to make a bit of a career move. They were about a year away from completion of their pre-sale, so he called me and said, we had a conversation about timing and so on, and so we were able to set the timing that he basically changed his job long enough before he took possession of the new condo, so that we didn't run into problems with that. So there's ways around all this stuff. You just need to be able to plan and sort of think things through. Um, uh, that was two. I'm trying to think what my third piece of advice would be. Well, yeah, and don't go buying trucks and
The toys. No
cars.
toys until after completion.
Don't buy all new furniture until you have a place to put all new furniture in. Yeah. And I think the other one, and this goes with any pre-sale, it's whether it's co-housing or not, is to just really think through, when you hear your completion date, consider that a loose date.
Yes.
It's really normal for there to be several completion dates before you actually hit one that sticks.
That is so true. And, when it comes down to timing for, say, not just to downsize or upsize or whatever, if there is a property to sell
Mm-hmm.
before completion,
Mm-hmm.
we do this little bit of a crystal ball date juggling.
Yeah.
And, I actually had it happen to me
Mm-hmm.
when I completed on my first pre sale almost 10 years ago. And I ended up selling my place 4 months early.
Yeah. That's what I did when I moved in here, and I sold what I thought was 4 months early, and then of course we had the delays because I should have known better and I didn't.
Yeah.
Um, so I slept on my friend's couch for 9 months.
Well, I moved in with my sister for 2 months, and
Yeah,
then I was like, no, I'll just get a furnished. All my stuff was in storage anyway.
yeah,
So I just did a furnished rental for the summer downtown. It was a little expensive, but I didn't travel anywhere that year.
yeah,
I thought, you know what? My vacation money is going for, you know, being in this cute little apartment downtown for the next 2 months.
yeah,
But that brings me to another thing that I don't think a lot of people realize when they read through the disclosure statement. Quite often, they'll give you this sort of floating timeline, but when it actually comes to the date, sometimes you only get 10 days notice to close.
yeah, yeah,
So, the reality of being in a sort of a situation where you might have sold your property and need to have a temporary place to stay
Mm-hmm.
until the actual closing date is something that actually ends up being a little bit of a reality. Do you find that people ever option for the bridge loan option instead of trying to sell first and then make
Well,
the sort of least?
so bridge financing, generally that happens only when you have a confirmed sale contract on your first property and the dates don't match up. So it
Right.
would be like you might take possession of your new place on October 1st and the sale of your old place completes on October 15th. That's a time when bridge financing would come into play. So I mean, it's an option for sure. But a lot of people think that you can get bridge financing before you've actually listed your old place for sale, and that's generally not the case. You
No.
actually have to have.
That's why I kind of brought it up because, between the both of us, I'm sure we run into a lot of assumptions that,
Mm-hmm.
people think that they have an idea. Oh, well, I'll just do this. And it's like, have you talked to anybody about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like I hate to be the one to burst the bubble, but in fact, this is maybe a better strategy for
Right.
you.
Yeah. 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 And that's one of the stressful and challenging things about, buying pre-sales is because you've got this mythical date. And I call it mythical because it moves quite a bit. So you just got to go into it with a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think really that is one of the most challenging things
Mm-hmm.
in real estate
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is that pre-sale date.
Yeah.
And it's one thing if you're renting and it's great, especially with your first time buyers when they're like so excited because they finally get to move into their own place.
Yeah.
And, as if you're in a month to month, you have a lot more leeway to give your
Yeah.
landlord notice than if you're having to sell something. But it's also a little bit mystifying to a lot of people on how that transition from selling one property and acquiring another property, how the finances all actually work out on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right, and that's a part where a lot of people, as you said, make assumptions about what happens, and they're a little bit shocked to find out that actually that's not the way it works.
One of the things that I dealt with a little while ago, that was new to me, because I guess I just hadn't had that kind of client for a while, is that if you're retired, even if your net worth is fantastic,
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily qualify for a conventional mortgage because they don't do like an income qualifying. The whole net worth qualifying is completely different.
Yeah, I mean, that would be specific to the individual. I mean, a
Right.
retiree who has CPP and OAS income or any other kind of pension income, we absolutely can use that. And that's something that surprises people a lot. They're surprised that, oh, I'm retired, all I have is OAS and CPP, so you can't use that income. And actually, yeah, we can use that, and I do it all the time.
Because it's government income. It's not
Yep.
like it's suddenly going to stop.
Or even any other kind of pension income, that's we can use that. Net worth lending is a little bit more difficult. It's not impossible, but there are lenders out there that will lend based on your net worth. A lot of times it will depend on having liquidable assets that are X amount of the actual mortgage that you're looking to get. So, but it's possible.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it was just interesting to me because this particular client, I mean, they weren't like a uber millionaire or anything, but they had a really good portfolio
Mm-hmm.
and probably could have covered their purchase price 2 or 3 times over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they weren't able to get a conventional mortgage because they were retired.
Yeah. Yeah. Without knowing the client specifics, it would be hard to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just never
That's
run. I,
interesting.
I think it was because they only wanted it for like 6 months.
Yeah.
They
Um,
didn't want a longer term
yeah,
financing option.
yeah, there may have been something else in that file that was making it hard.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So how do you approach clients that are maybe heading towards what might be their last property,
Yep.
um, and buying in retirement with the idea that it's sort of their last property, with some of the tax changes that are coming and have or happened, and it may
Mhm.
not be your purview because we're not supposed to give tax and accounting advice. I understand that, but are there any kind of suggestions that you have for clients as far as how they might want to set up their financing or their mortgages?
I think it really depends on what the goals are for that client and what their long-term needs are. Um, Sometimes a reverse mortgage is the
Mm-hmm.
answer. Depending on what their situation is. Sometimes just doing a straight up home equity line of credit is the right answer for that client. And
Right,
sometimes putting them into a 5-year fixed with 30-year amortization on it is the right question, knowing that they'll never pay it off completely. But
right,
um, it's really client specific. It depends on what their goals are. It depends on
right,
what their financial situation is. It depends on what family they have. Are they, hoping to leave the entirety of their home value to somebody else, or do they not have any kids and it doesn't really matter? I mean, there's a whole lot of things to take into consideration at that point.
do you work with any estate planning or legal people? Do you have people that you regularly work with on those types of sort of more longer term planning,
Yeah.
financial?
I don't for seniors. I do have some legal people I work with in collaborative divorce, and so helping people navigate spousal buyouts and dividing up equity and doing the refinancing there.
Hmm.
I do a
Hmm.
bit of that kind of thing. So, mhm. and sometimes those cross over a little bit. I was just looking at a seminar a couple days ago on gray divorce, and that's seniors splitting up and dividing their assets and using reverse mortgages, for example, to help facilitate that.
Right.
Mhm.
So this is maybe a inexperienced newbie question on my part. I know what reverse mortgages are. I don't necessarily know the mechanics of how they function.
Mhm.
In my understanding, it's being able to use the equity for um, payments, like paying yourself a payment.
Yeah.
But if you are closing on a newer property,
Mhm.
can you actually have a reverse mortgage when you're closing on a property based on the total loan to value ratio or something like that? How does it work, Lisa? Take it away.
Absolutely. So, for example, if you were a senior and you were wanting to buy a property, maybe you're downsizing, but you also are concerned about your cash flow in your retirement years. One option might be to take a reverse mortgage, and by taking the reverse mortgage, unlike a traditional mortgage where you're paying principal and interest every month on the mortgage, on a reverse mortgage, you're not paying anything on it. You're accruing interest every month, but that just kind of gets added onto your balance. With the idea being that when you no longer need the place, either you die or you move into care home or something,
Right,
sell the property, and at that point, the mortgage is paid out. So,
right.
it's not for everyone, but it's a really good product for the right
Cash flow.
people. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And what would you say the average sort of rate of interest or accumulated debt, like
Yeah. I
how
mean,
that works?
that's so hard. It depends when you get it, just like with any other mortgage, but
Right.
it's a little bit higher. Like if you were to get one today, you'd be paying a little bit more on it than what you would be paying on a 5-year
Like
fix.
around over 7 or over 8?
Honestly, I haven't even looked at the rates for reverse mortgages in a week or so, and rates are dropping so fast right now
Oh
that
my God. And of
not.
course they are, because I just renewed like 3 weeks ago.
Oh no, yeah, I would guess I maybe around 7%, but that
Oh,
actually
okay.
that sounds high to me when I say it. It's yeah, I haven't looked at them, reverse
That's
mortgage.
okay. I won't put you on the spot. It's just
Yeah.
interesting to understand how the sort of mechanics of
Yeah.
something like that
I know
work.
I was looking at them probably 4 weeks ago for a client, and they were sitting around 7%, but I know they've dropped since, like everything has
Right.
dropped since then. But, yeah, they are a little bit higher interest rate than a traditional mortgage, but sometimes that's the right thing,
The right
and that's
option for the
yeah, that's
person.
right.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation that I have, that's give my clients the information, they can make the decision that's best for them.
Right.
To be honest, I've talked about, I will probably do a reverse mortgage at some point in retirement, because that's just, when I was younger, I didn't plan properly, and it's okay to try and do all the catch up years later. But it's very much an option that's on my list of potential retirement
Right.
options.
So how much equity do you have to have? Like, does there come a point where they say, okay, there's not much equity left, or do
Yeah,
they give
it's
you a room like
it's
between
it's
a certain percent?
generally age based.
Oh, okay. So it's
Okay.
more like what do they call that? Insurance. No, when they do something over time. Sorry, my
Well,
brain went.
yeah, the older you are, the more you generally have access to. Most, but like typically around 50-ish%.
Right,
They're set up so that you're not going to end up in a negative equity
right,
situation. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So if you're, 75 years old and your house is 100% paid off, you've got 50% of the value of the home to draw from over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking of the word actuarial.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Is that's the risk based on age, based on insurance, based on that whole world, that
Yeah.
whole mystery math
Yeah.
calculations
Yeah. Well,
that
and
they
and
use.
like I said, generally the way it works, the older you are, the more you can access, because it's also
Right.
the older you are, the less time you're like, going to use the house till it's sold
Yeah,
and the loan is paid off. So you don't have as
right,
long to accrue interest on it. Hmm.
right. Well, it makes me think that maybe one of my next guests should be a tax planning expert on
Hmm.
how these things might better be structured for people, depending on their situations. Because having an election coming up, and I try not to be too political, but the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, the government wants to get their hand on that capital gains money that for most people is really only one time in their life.
Yeah.
Maybe one or two times they've made a significant gain
Yeah.
on a property purchase. And I would think if you had a reverse mortgage, that's also going to reduce your capital gains if your house is paid down. I don't know. That's a question I
That's a
guess we'll
question for a
ask
tax accountant.
for a
Yeah.
tax account.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question though. Not one I thought of. Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do when I'm, 62 or
Hmm.
72 or 82?
Hmm.
I guess those actuarial tables probably needed to have changed a little bit in the last little while too, because I mean, at our building here, I think the oldest lady is 92.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she's, still goes out for a walk every day with her cane, and she's
Hmm.
the grandmother and mother of other people who live in the building. But she has
Oh,
her own unit, and
yeah.
she comes down to we have ours on a Monday night. We have a potluck style. I guess back in the day they did it a lot more, but
Hmm.
COVID kind of changed a lot of what was going on. But yeah,
Hmm.
she comes down sometimes. Other times she stays in her unit.
Yeah.
And it's just Yeah, I had never thought I'd be in a community like this. A, I didn't really know about them, and B, I always thought I was so fiercely independent. But
Yeah.
it's
Oh, I
nice to
get it.
have the
But
neighbors.
it's so great for those of us who are fiercely independent. Like I said, and I repeat this all the time, it's a great way to live alone with other people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think we'll bring it to a close,
Mhm.
Lysa. If people want to get a hold of you for mortgage information and
Mhm.
or other
Or co-housing
long-term
information, or
planning or
yeah.
co-housing information, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
I can be reached by my website. You can contact me directly. That's probably the easiest. It's lysadixon.ca,
Hmm.
lysadixon.ca. I can also be reached directly by email at lisa@averbackmortgages.com. But that's
Cool. Well, we're going to have all those links in the area below. And if you liked this video, we'd appreciate a thumbs up, and please subscribe. I'm loving the feedback that I'm starting to get as we get a bit more traction. And thank you, Lysa, for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you. What do the kids say these days? IRL.
yeah, you got to come by for a tour.
I will. Okay. Take care.
Thanks, Shelly. Bye.
Okay. Bye.